If you've ever been left out of a group chat, uninvited from the dinner, or cropped out of the photo, you already know the most unsettling part isn't the silence. It's the precision. Because by the time you notice it, it's already been decided. You weren't forgotten. You were edited. And you've seen that move in real life, in families, in friendships, in workplaces. It's never random. It's a message. Now that same quiet edit is why people are side-eyeing the rumors about a definitive One Direction documentary, confirmed, in development, or just living in the rumor ecosystem. Because when people hear definitive, they assume truth. But the biggest story isn't is it happening? It's this. Who gets to be part of the official version, and who doesn't? In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you how omission is the most brutal weapon in media, and why the people who get left out don't just lose screen time. They lose the ability to protect their identity. And here's the promise. By the end of this video, you'll be able to spot omission in any documentary in under 30 seconds. Because we're going to break it down in 3 moves. Why exclusion hits so hard psychologically. How documentaries manufacture an official version. How omission decides who gets permission to be the icon. This isn't fan drama. This is how history gets manufactured while you watch. Before we even get into One Direction, here's what omission looks like on screen. Who gets the emotional music? Who gets the thoughtful voiceover? Who gets framed as reflective versus difficult? Who gets shown in montages? And who becomes a blur, a gap, a footnote? Because the public doesn't remember what was cut. They remember what felt official. Now let's talk about why that works. Chapter 1. The Psychology of Exclusion. Let's keep this clean. Big media projects don't just cover stories. They frame them. They don't just record history. They decide what counts as history. So when people start noticing missing names, whether it's Zayn in archival footage, or Harry and Niall in reunion conversations, that's not paranoia. That's pattern recognition. And you already understand it without the celebrity version, not being invited, not being tagged, not being mentioned. Because criticism still acknowledges you exist. Even hate gives you a place in the room. But omission? Omission deletes you. It turns a real person into a blank space, and lets the public fill it with whatever story they want. And here's what makes omission so effective. It looks polite. It looks like a scheduling conflict, a contract issue, a creative decision. But most of the time, omission isn't neutral. It's a statement. It says, this is the version we're authorizing. Everyone else is inconvenient. And once the public absorbs an authorized version, it becomes very hard to undo. Because people don't remember what was missing. They remember what felt true. Chapter 2, the This Is Us edit, case study number 1. To understand what could happen with a new documentary, you have to look at the prototype, the 2013 film This Is Us. If you watch it today, it still works. It feels warm, intimate. You see jokes, brotherhood, 5 best friends living the dream. And that's not fake. But here's the manipulation. It didn't lie by showing them having fun. It lied by suggesting fun was the main thing happening. Because we know now, from later interviews, solo music, the schedule, the body language fans replayed for years, that era wasn't just joy. It was exhaustion, isolation, pressure, disagreements about sound, friction, emotional burnout. And there were narratives bubbling online that were messy and complicated, the kind of mess documentaries avoid when they want the product to stay clean. So the film created a safe version, the camping trip version, the we're fine version, the this is fun version. And when you build a safe version of young men under extreme pressure, you're doing something bigger than PR. You're creating a contract with the audience. They're lucky. They're grateful. Nothing is wrong. And once the audience believes that, the band loses a basic human right. The right to struggle without being punished for it. Because characters in a pop movie aren't allowed to be depressed. They're only allowed to be grateful. That's why omission becomes a time bomb. Because when you edit out pain, the eventual crash looks like betrayal. So when Zayn left, the general public was shocked. But if the documentary had included the mental load, the suffocating pace, the reality, people wouldn't have been shocked. They would have said, of course he left. The omission didn't just hide truth, it trained the audience to misunderstand truth later. Chapter 3. what a documentary really is. People hear documentary and assume truth. But documentaries aren't court records. They're stories with budgets. A documentary is not a mirror. It's a spotlight. And spotlights don't show the whole room. They show what the director wants you to stare at until it feels like reality. That's why documentaries are powerful. They create something the internet doesn't. An official version. Clean chapters. Clear heroes. A beginning, a middle, an end. But real life isn't shaped like that. So a documentary has to do something unnatural. It compresses years of chaos into one narrative spine. And the first thing you cut when you compress a story? Contradictions. Complexity. People who complicate the emotional arc. People who might say, actually, that's not what happened. This is the key. Omission is how you remove resistance without making it look like censorship. You don't have to silence someone. You just don't invite them into the frame. And when the platform is big enough, the frame becomes reality. Chapter 4. The Power of Being Included. Here's what being included in a major documentary actually gives you. Not just attention. Power. Power in 3 ways. Power number 1, voice. You get to explain yourself on record, in a polished environment, with music behind your words, editing that makes you look healed, thoughtful, reasonable. Most people don't read old interviews. They absorb the cleanest version they're offered. Power number 2, influence. Not always full veto power, but proximity creates leverage. If you're essential to the project, the story naturally bends to keep you. Power number 3, positioning. This is the real weapon. Tone decides who looks honest, who looks mature, who looks bitter. A documentary can turn the same sentence into 2 different people just by changing the music underneath it. A pause can look like depth or guilt. A smile can look like peace or arrogance. So when someone isn't included, whether it's Harry, Niall, or Zayn, they don't just lose minutes. They lose the ability to defend their identity inside the official version. And this is where it gets bigger than one direction. Chapter 5, The Beckham Blueprint, Case Study Number 2. We recently watched this exact power play in the Beckham documentary. Huge hit. Beautifully shot. Emotionally gripping. But here's the part that matters. It was produced by David Beckham's own studio. Which means it wasn't just a documentary. It was a controlled legacy package. Notice how the affair scandal was handled. It was acknowledged. It was hinted at. We saw emotion. But did we get raw details? No. Names? No. The ugly, unfiltered version of that year? Absolutely not. We got the looking back version, pain softened by time and shaped by taste. The documentary gave emotional access, but denied factual access. It was a vibe piece, not an investigation. And that's the blueprint for One Direction. If a One Direction documentary happens, it likely won't be a hard teardown of the industry machine, management, pressure, the boy band factory. It will be nostalgic, polished, music-driven, a legacy piece. Because platforms don't just sell stories. They sell feelings. And feelings are easier to package than truth. So anyone who threatens the smoothness of that narrative, anyone who introduces contradictions, resentment, complexity, becomes a problem. Not because they're evil. Because they're unpredictable. Sometimes exclusion isn't hate. It's insulation. Not they can't stand each other. More like, we can't afford the mess. Chapter 6. The Zayn Paradox and the New Split. For years, the omission story centered on Zayn. The one who left. The one the official story struggled to integrate. But now, the rumors have flipped. Now we're hearing about scenarios where projects might feature Zayn and Louis, while Harry and Niall are absent from the frame. And people keep asking, how could the biggest stars be left out? Here's the answer. Because being the biggest star changes what you're allowed to participate in. At a certain level, you stop being a musician. You become infrastructure. A moving corporation made of contracts, partnerships, headlines, and risk management. And a raw documentary about your boy band origins? That's not nostalgia. That's volatility. Because the moment you sit in that interview chair, you lose something priceless. Control over what your face means in the edit. Control over how your silence gets interpreted. Control over which era of you becomes the real you in public memory. And here's the trap: even if you say nothing, the documentary still speaks for you. Because your absence becomes the story. Chapter 7. When a doc creates keepers of the flame. If a documentary comes out with only certain members, it creates a lopsided history. It implies those people are the keepers of the truth. The keepers of the era. The real loyal ones. And the ones who aren't there? They become too big for the band. Too distant. Too cold. Over it. It doesn't matter why they're missing. The audience only sees that they're missing. And silence always looks like arrogance to a fan who wants closure. That's how omission becomes a quiet form of character assassination, without a single accusation. Chapter 8. Pop stardom is permission. Now we get to the core rule. Pop stardom isn't just talent. It's narrative permission. The public has to agree you get to be the icon. Labels can buy promotion. They cannot buy belief. Belief is earned through 1,000 micro-moments. Consistency. Restraint. Authenticity cues. The sense that someone is choosing their identity, not being assigned one. And that's why omission is such a power move. Because it quietly reassigns permission. A documentary can imply, this is the voice of the era. This is the one who stayed loyal. This is the truth keeper. And by contrast, without saying it, this one is irrelevant. This one doesn't care. This one should be blamed. That's permission engineering. And it works because humans are wired to follow the official version. Chapter 9. The reveal. Don't look at the light. Look at the shadow. So when you see that final cut, the polished interviews, the perfect archival footage, the emotional music that makes everything feel healed, don't look at the light. Look at the shadow. Because the missing names aren't a footnote. They're the headline. Their absence doesn't just suggest a fracture. It confirms that the fracture was real, and that someone is still managing how it gets remembered. They aren't excluding people to finish the story. They're excluding people to replace the story. They're betting that if they don't show the scar, you'll forget the wound ever happened. But the thing about scars is, even if you cover them up, the nerves remember. The power question. So let me ask you something, and don't answer like a fan. Answer like someone who understands power. If omission is the weapon, what truth do you think a definitive documentary would be trying to avoid? And who benefits most from that silence? Drop your take in the comments. And if you want the next video, I'll break down the deeper rule behind all of this, how the industry tries to assign the next icon, and why the public keeps refusing. Because replacements don't fail by accident. They fail because permission can't be manufactured. And once you see that, you'll never watch an official version the same way again.